Yes, welcome into SportsBit Betting Inside today, weekend preview edition. Pauly and Teddy, big game breakdown. Count them, four NFL games we're going to go over, and part two, deep dive, how to beat the preseason, and we'll get to the play of the day as we had a winner yesterday. All that coming up, and hey, welcome to the preseason, Teddy. Except for the Broncos and the Bears, all the games were within one score of the point spread in the fourth quarter, and no starters on the field anywhere.
Well, I mean, what did we say? The mainstream media is going to talk about what starters are going to be sitting out and who's going to get two series in the game week one of the preseason. Here on SportsBit, we're going to focus on the type of information that you need, or that should at least help you in your goal to pick preseason winners. And that, of course, is trying to handicap these second halves, trying to handicap these fourth quarters. Yeah, lots of randomness. You know, we have 3 overs and 3 unders. Favorites went 4-2 versus the closing lines. That's a little bit misleading because the Panthers closed as the favorites after a lot of late Carolina money. Baltimore was a favorite all week in that game. If you look at the opening numbers, favorites went 5-1 versus the opener. So good day for the favorites. Nothing doing when it came to early totals trends.
Well, when you're talking August, Teddy, it's always special teams and defensive touchdowns, and that happened last night.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was a ton of it. It started with Washington. You know, Washington gave up a 101-yard kick return and non-offensive scores. Look, they make all the difference in the regular season. They really make all the difference in August. And when you're lucky enough to get a non-offensive score for the team that you backed, you expect to cover that point spread. That's exactly what happened with Atlanta. Of course, Matt Schaub, he carved up the Redskins' second-string defense. Looked pretty good in that regard.
The offensive line issues, let's start with Philly.
Oh, I mean, Philly looked awful. They won the game. They covered the point spread, but there was nothing that looked good about the Phillies' offense. They averaged 2.8 yards per play for the game. They had 2 passing first downs for the entire game. Remember, this is a team that's spending more money in the quarterback position than any team in NFL history. They had 2 passing first downs. No team's going to have fewer this weekend. The Bears got shut out. They only had 130 total yards. They only had 8 first downs, but at least they had 5 passing first downs. Philly with 2. But Tampa Bay with the 5 turnovers, the offensive injury problems that we talked about on yesterday's SportsBit, they were very, very real. And you're going to love this one. You wrote it in the notes, Paul.
Of course I did. I couldn't believe it. The announcers freaked out. Aguayo missed his first PAT, the most accurate kicker in college football history. Some teams ripped him. Some media members and teams ripped him. They grabbed him in the second round. And he missed his PAT, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I would think Aguayo will be fine, but second round, you know, we argued about that when they drafted him. I say if you want a guy, you pick him wherever you get him. But the bottom line is, yeah, second round's a little bit high for a kicker who's missing extra points.
Red zone issues. We'll get to the Panthers in a second. Jacksonville picked up where they left off last year. They outgained the Jets by 150 yards, 1 of 11 on third down, and 1 of 4 in the red zone.
Yeah, I mean, it was like vintage Jacksonville. We saw this over and over again last year. They win all the yardage battles. They're moving the ball up and down the fields. They get in the red zone, they can't score. The Jags outgained the Jets by 150 yards in August, and they lose and fail to cover. Oops.
Yes. Also, how about the Patriots?
Well, we got to talk about Carolina next because we're going.
Excuse me, I forgot about Carolina. Yes.
Yeah, I mean Carolina.
This was wild. Baltimore gets the cover. As you mentioned, Carolina went off the favorite. How about the hijinks, point spread hijinks here in this one?
Oh, I mean insanity. And it didn't matter which side you had. If you had good numbers, you were in position to cash everything. But it didn't work out for you at the end of the game. Let's run the scenario. First, Carolina, 1 of 6 in the red zone. And when you go 1 of 6 in the red zone, hard to cover point spreads. That being said, Baltimore scores a touchdown, up 20-13 in the fourth quarter, and they go for 2. Was that the fourth quarter or was that late third quarter? Whatever it was. They well into the second half. They're up by 7. But in the preseason, everyone's like, we're not playing for overtime. Everyone works on the 2-point conversions, and that's what Baltimore did. So if they kicked the extra point to go up 21-13, the Panthers win 22-21 and cover the spread or push. But instead, Carolina is in a position where they had to go for it. On 4th and 4 at the end, the field goal wouldn't have done anything for them except for send the game into overtime, and no one wants an OT game in August. Webb couldn't pull it off, but I think that was the worst beat of the night. If you had the Ravens plus the points, even if you had the Ravens -1, pretty tough beat to take in that one, even though the stats weren't particularly one-sided in Carolina's favor, the way they were in some of these other games.
All right, play of the day winner. Now to the Patriots. They cover. Garoppolo played well, but 2 defensive touchdowns.
Yeah, and that's the difference. I mean, Patriots at 2 defensive scores and +4 turnover margin. There's definitely some random luck with turnovers, but teams like the Patriots, somehow, some way, they seem to find to get a way to get a positive turnover differential every year. And teams like, I don't know, Jacksonville, they seem to have a negative turnover differential every year. In week 1 of the preseason, this was all about New England taking advantage of miscues. The first defensive score helped. The second defensive score was the one that actually covered the number.
Yeah, sick Denver defense again. They shut out the Bears, as you mentioned. What'd you think of Sanchez and the Simeon battle?
Well, I mean, neither one wowed me. Between them, 17-25 for 187 yards in the first half. So solid numbers. But I don't think that Mark Sanchez put any distance between himself and Trevor Simeon following the preseason opener. The bigger news for this one is that the Bears D. I don't know what you want to say about the Bears. We talked about some of the offensive line issues. We talked about the impact injury they suffered on the offensive line earlier in the week. And, the Jay Cutler quote, "I don't think you want to hit the panic button, but there's a whole lot for us to get better on." The offensive line and the pass protection, the running game was a complete disaster. Chicago's offense was not good in that preseason opener.
All right, let's hit on a couple baseball games. The Twins were a bad bet. They got swept at home in a doubleheader, and the Astros scored 25 runs, and the Twins took money in Game 2. Red Sox, the bullpen blew it again. This time it was Ziegler. They've lost 7 of their last 9 at home. They lost the series to the Yankees. They can't distance themselves in the wild card. Bad loss there again. The Mets were -240 with Thor. They got swept by the god-awful Diamondbacks, and they were shut out 9-0. Collins went nuts afterwards in a post-game tirade.
I mean, the Mets right now, they don't look like a playoff team, let alone a World Series team the way they were a year
500.
ago.
Yeah.
But it's not pretty in New York right now. And I don't blame Collins for getting pissed off. Every once in a while, as a manager, you got to start slamming doors and yelling at people and doing that as a motivational tactic when the less abrasive stuff you're doing isn't working. But the Mets have been in a funk for quite a while right now. They needed a little bit of a wake-up call.
Yep. One more. Cubs win 10 in a row, 31 games over 500, a 13-game lead in the division. The last time they had a league this big, 1929, when they went to the World Series and lost. And the Cubs bullpen has just been dynamite since Theo made all these moves.
Yeah, it sure has. I mean, look, Chapman tied an all-time record in the 9th. Can't do any better than this. 3 pitches, 3 outs. But look at the graphic right here for that Cubs bullpen ERA. Pre-All-Star break, before the moves, mediocre, mid-level pen. Since the All-Star break, with Chapman at the back end of that bullpen, ERA under 2, second best ERA in all of baseball during that span. Chicago, we were worried about them before the All-Star break. Right now, I'm not worried about the Cubs. They are the team to beat moving forward.
All right, fun segment. Here we go. Football is here. Deep dive part 2, how to beat the preseason. Up next, 4 NFL games on Big Game Breakdown. That's coming up next on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Hey, SportsBit viewers, tune in to the MLB Odds Couple Show for Friday, August 12th. Mike Brenner had a couple more units up yesterday, right, Mike Brenner?
Okay, let's keep it kicking.
How are you feeling about the Friday card?
There's a couple jumping out.
A couple that you're jumping out. All right, I'm feeling good about it too. Tune into the show, MLB Odds Couple Show, Friday, August 12th.
That's right. Come on in.
All right, back on Big Game Breakdown here on SportsBit. As always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Let's start with the Dolphins and the Giants. Giants at home, 2.5. 36.5 the total. 2 new coaches. It's Gase against McAdoo. And so far in Dolphins practice, a lot of short passes out of Tannehill and more, Teddy.
Yeah, nothing but dink and dunk so far for Miami. And Gase was asked about it. This is not an offense that's throwing a lot of vertical passes. Quote, "I'm fine with it. I'm the one scripting the plays, calling the plays. I've had a little success with what we do, There's a time and a place. There's also a time and a place not to get sacked 60 times in a year, too. The whole league is 10 yards and under. That's what it is. Nobody is going down the field. There's one team that does it really, maybe two, Pittsburgh and Arizona. Hold on to the ball, and they chuck it down the field. More teams than not, it's 10 yards and under. That's where all the passing game is. The DNs are too good. If you want to stand back there and have your quarterbacks get your brains beat out, go at it. You know, in some ways I agree with Gase in that regard, especially considering the fact that Tannehill has been sacked more time than any other NFL quarterback since he came into the league. But you got to stretch defenses. And the teams that are stretching the defenses, Pittsburgh and Arizona, we're talking about two Super Bowl contenders, not two bottom feeders.
Your quarterback rotations, Giants, Eli, Nassib, and Logan Thomas, who I can't believe still in the league. Miami, the defense has outplayed the offense throughout camp. Tannehill more, and then Dowdy, the kid out of Western Kentucky. Detroit and Pittsburgh. The Lions and the Steelers. Steelers 34. The total teams have been practicing together all week. Tomlin and Caldwell are friends.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that means a whole lot, with Tomlin and Caldwell being friends. But it's a situation where, again, when you have the teams that are practicing against each other and then playing a preseason game, the practices are more important than the game itself. Here's a quote from Glover Quinn from Detroit. This, talking about practice, right here is probably better than a game. Obviously, the first preseason game, their starters won't play as much. I don't know how much we're going to play, but in practice, we get to go at it for 2 hours. We get to get in a lot of good work against their guys. They get in a lot of good work against us. So this isn't a situation where the game itself is the most meaningful thing. The practices are meaning more than the games.
Yes. Quarterback rotations, Roethlisberger, Gradkowski, Landry Jones for the Lions, Stafford, Orlovsky, and Rudock, the kid from Michigan. He's expected to get some PT in the second half. And here we go. Hold the phones. The Steelers 2-11 straight up the last three preseasons.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was talking about on yesterday's show that Tomlin bet on, and Tomlin's long-term track record remains bet on in August. The last couple of years, not so much, clearly, with that 2-11 straight up mark the last preseason. Of course, 7 of those 11 losses have come by double-figure margins. And meanwhile, Jim Caldwell, he was bet against in Indy for the preseason. We hated Jim Caldwell in August. In Detroit, guess what? 6-2 straight up, 6-2 against the spread the last 2 years. Good quarterback rotations go a long, long way. In Indy, Caldwell didn't have him. In Detroit, at least with Orlovsky, he's had a decent backup.
Yeah. Next up, the Vikings and the Bengals, liveoddsportsbookreview.com. Cincinnati 2.5, 35 the total. Here we have joint practices again.
Yeah, and this is a situation where Minnesota, 8-1 in the preseason under Mike Zimmer. And it's not necessarily that Zimmer has been a guy that says, we got to win in August. I'm really putting my foot down for winning these games. But one thing that Mike Zimmer has done, he wants his teams to play clean. And if you go through the box scores from last night's game, you're going to see all these games, 12 penalties, 14 penalties, 9 penalties for 112 yards. You see the turnover, you see the miscues on special teams, etc., etc. Those are all priorities for Mike Zimmer. His teams tend not to have a ton of penalties, a ton of turnovers, a ton of special teams miscues. And frankly, when you play clean in the preseason, you win a whole lot of games, Pauly. But, I want to bet Minnesota, but 7 words have really kept me off the Vikings in this game. You know what those 7 words are?
Joel Stave, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
That's 2. That's all you need. That's all you need.
Second half.
Oh.
It's going to be Bridgewater and Sean Hill early, Joe Stave late. For Cincinnati, you got Dalton, then A.J. McCarron, who's been a little bit banged up, but reports are that he's expected to play. Could see Keith Wenning and possibly Joe Licata, the rookie out of Buffalo. When you're talking about Joel Stave on the one side and Wenning and Licata on the other, maybe you take a look at the second half under in this ball game, Paul.
Yes, last game, Cowboys and the Rams. Rams 4.5, 35 the total. They're expecting 90,000 at the Coliseum. They've been having open practices there at that stadium as the Hard Knocks teams here. People are excited in L.A. about the Rams.
Yeah, and of course, when you're getting 90,000 people for a preseason game, it's meaningful. It's meaningful for the guys on the field as well as for the fans. They weren't getting 90,000 fans for preseason games in St. Louis. And I think everyone's excited for the Rams in a way that we haven't seen that excitement level in recent seasons. It's worth noting here, Dallas is only 2 quarterbacks expected to play in this game for the Cowboys. Jamil Showers and Dak Prescott. The Rams' third stringer, Sean Mannion, he's probably better than either one of those guys. And Mannion's going to come in only after Case Keenum and Jared Goff play for L.A. And it's also worth noting that Goff, a lot of times we worry about the guy who's going to come in as a rookie in the second half and not necessarily play well. Carson Wentz last night for Philly. Goff's going to go early here. Goff's going to come in right after Keenum, and it should be Mannion in the second half, a guy who has a fair bit of NFL preseason experience under his belt. That's good news for L.A. Dallas, again, with the injuries they've had in recent years, with the way their team is structured, Jason Garrett's got one goal this preseason. Get out of August healthy. I'm not expecting a lot from Dallas in this preseason opener.
We'll get back to this game on the play of the day. LiveOddsSportsbookReview.com. Up next, the deep dive. How to beat the preseason, Part 2, Advanced Methods. It's coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
So we're giving you picks every day, and you're probably making your own as well. Be sure to participate in SBR's weekly Twitter Bankroll Challenge. Just post your picks on Twitter with @SBRSportsPicks and the hashtag BetSBR before 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every day, Monday through Friday. We'll be betting your picks, and if the bankroll is positive at the end of the week, you could win the profits. Picks must be of events taking place that day and available in at least one of the major sportsbooks shown in our Best Sportsbooks page.
Back on SportsBit, Pauly and Teddy, time for the deep dive. Part 2, how to beat the preseason, Advanced Methods. This is legitimate stuff you're not going to get anywhere else. Teddy, I know you got some friends saying, don't give this out on the air. Don't give out your secrets. But we're going to do this now. Here we go, Advanced Methods. Number 1, threes don't mean shit in the preseason. 1 and 2s mean everything. The books price it wrong. The markets price it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, look again, what we saw last night. A team up 7 in the fourth quarter going for a 2-point conversion. You'll never see that in the regular season. Coaches will do anything they can to avoid overtime, and yet the markets are obsessed with threes, the way the markets are always obsessed with threes in the NFL. Threes don't mean squat in the preseason. They really don't. There's a huge difference between -1 and -2.5 in the preseason. In the regular season, that's worth maybe 20 cents. 20 cents in the preseason, it's worth more. You're going to see games land on 1. You're going to see games land on 2. Pay attention. August numbers are different than September numbers. Don't worry about the 3. You can bet games at 2.5. You can bet games at 3.5. But make sure you capture the best of the number when it comes to pick 'em. -1, -1.5, -2, -2.5. Those numbers really matter when it comes to beating the preseason.
Talked about this earlier with the Buccaneers. Cluster injuries mean everything.
Yeah, and I think there's some confusion about what cluster injuries are. Cluster injuries doesn't mean that a team's got a whole bunch of guys banged up. It means they have a whole bunch of guys from one particular unit that are banged up. And there's 4 that I look for in the preseason in particular. I want a banged up offensive line, dead nuts bet against. Banged up defensive line, banged up secondary, banged up receiving core. Coaches will do anything to avoid more injuries at those positions, which definitely affects their game plan. If you find situations with cluster injuries at any one of those positions, OL, DL, cornerback/safety, wide receiver, that team immediately becomes a bet against squad moving forward until they get healthy. So it's not overall injuries, it's injuries at any one given position. Look here at Chicago. Their offensive line is the most recent example of cluster injuries really being a negative factor for any particular ball club.
Number 3, don't make the mistake of looking at the starting quarterback battles. The markets tend to do that as well. Focus on who's going to be the backup. Look at those, who's fighting for that backup spot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, suckers focus on the starting quarterback battles. Yeah, okay, I know. Sanchez is battling against Simeon, and Denver won and covered. That doesn't mean that the Broncos are going to move forward winning and covering ball games. What's the theme that we've talked about on SportsBit? We're talking about point spreads get decided after halftime, generally. So, when you have a battle for the backup quarterback job, someone's going to be on the sidelines in headphones, and someone's going to be deactivated every Sunday and sitting in street clothes. Okay? Makes a big difference between the 2 and the 3. And in terms of where you're moving in the NFL hierarchy, a huge difference. So you love passes being thrown after halftime by two guys who are really playing for something. Competitive third-string quarterback battles are also something to pay attention to, and mobile quarterbacks are money. Let's not forget, when you're talking about the fourth quarter of these games, heck, the receivers barely know the routes, the third-string offensive line stink, there's not much timing in the passing games, so a quarterback that can create a first down with his feet, those type of QBs are worth their weight in gold. Look at Seattle, a class example. They brought in Trevon Boykin and Vernon Adams because both have the capacity to make plays with their feet the same way that Russell Wilson does.
Number 4, very hard to beat totals.
Yeah, I don't play many totals in August. It takes something special for me to get involved. You know, I need a team that has all their cornerbacks out and an opponent that wants to throw downfield to bet an over. And week 3 overs sometimes you can get involved with. But again, there's got to be good rationale behind it. Week 1 unders is the conventional wisdom. But I'm telling you, Pauly, I'll bet sides in the preseason. There's a ton of randomness in totals. And week 4 is pretty much the same way. You know, when it comes to week 4 and nobody's playing anyone and it's all backups and third stringers and guys fighting for the last job, I'm lucky if I find 1 or 2 good bets in week 4. I'm happy when I find 1 or 2 good bets in week 4. The time to beat preseason is really the first 3 weeks.
Number 5, understanding coach speak.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, we talk about the nuance of August, and this is not something you're going to really be able to pick up in one day or 1 week or even one preseason. But over time, as you try to read between the lines of what the coaches were saying, it's something we talked about again on yesterday's Sports Show, trying to read between the lines of what Belichick was saying and what he was thinking. And lo and behold, we ended up getting a point spread cover on New England as a result of the nuance of what Belichick was saying. Remember, there's coaches who are going to be saying, oh, I'm really pissed off because we had a bad showing from the first stringers. That coach still might not care about winning the game. He just wants to see the first string look better. Remember, I'm going to say it over and over again, point spread outcomes are usually determined after halftime, and understanding the coach speak, learning to translate the coach speak, goes a long, long way towards getting the better sides in the second half of these ball games.
Last one, if you're laying more than 2 points, you better have some good reasons for doing so.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a number of teams we talk about that are going to be bet on, and there are a number of teams that we talk about in any given week that are going to be bet against. But if you're laying points and more than a point or two in the preseason, you got to have both. You know, you can't just have a bet on situation to lay 3.5. You can't just have a bet against situation and lay 4.5. You need bet on and bet against in the same game, which is, of course, how we got to our play of the day for today.
Yes, betting number 278. Now, the good numbers are gone, but the LA Rams laying 4.5. Not an A-plus level wager, but the Cowboys aren't going to show up, just like they didn't bother to show up last year in the preseason. Let's make it 2 in a row in the preseason to start with the Rams. Play of the day, betting number 278. All right, we were getting 4,000 or 5,000 views for the NBA Finals. Football is here. Let's get right into it. Let's double these views as we get into football season. I don't know what I'm going to give the viewers, but maybe pizza card, something. We will. I will definitely take care of the viewers. We get this sucker up to 9,000 and 10,000.
This is what we're going to give the viewers, Pauly. We're going to give them football.
You got it.
You've been waiting around all summer. We've been talking baseball, basketball, hockey, track and field. God knows. It's football season. Get pumped and tell your friends about sports. But please, we need viewers. Come on board and allow us to give you a sports center for gamblers every single day.
Yes, have a good weekend. Enjoy all the games. We'll recap everything Monday on SportsBit with Pauly and Teddy on SBRPicks.com.